actually one brief point. The Eastern Church would have no problem with proceeds from the Father through the Son, but not and the Son.
Right.
My question is, how much of the Byzantine legacy was continued through the Ottoman Empire?
Well, that's an excellent question. How much of the Byzantine legacy was carried out through the Ottoman Empire? The Ottoman Sultan saw himself as the successor of the Byzantine emperors. He even styled himself as Caesar. And the name Constantinople doesn't get changed. It's the capital of the Ottoman Empire. It doesn't get changed until the 20th century. But the Ottomans also came in, obviously, with their own traditions, their own faith. I guess I'd answer that question by saying they tried to consciously style themselves, their imperial forms. If you look at the Blue Mosque, it's quite obviously patterned on Hagia Sophia. So it's sort of not a direct continuation, but a distant continuation. Yes, sir.
When the two churches split, the Pope, of course, was the head in the Western Church, but in the Eastern Church, how did the hierarchy, how did it work? I know nowadays there's various heads of different, I think the chief one in Constantinople.
Right. How was the hierarchy, the church hierarchy split up, the patriarchs in the East? Officially, the Patriarchate of Jerusalem, since it was the holy city, that was outside. They were all technically equal. There was a special reverence for the Patriarch of Jerusalem because he was outside. But the most powerful patriarch in practice was in Constantinople because he was right next to the emperor. He had access to imperial power. Officially, they were all first among equals. They were all equals.
How many were there?
There were originally 5 patriarchs of the Christian church: Rome, Jerusalem, Antioch, Constantinople, and Alexandria. And of those 5, one is in the west, it's Rome, and the other 4 are in the east, which I think is a contributing factor to why the Pope develops into sort of an authoritarian hierarchical structure, whereas the east, there are 4 equals there, and they retain this idea of you have to decide things in concert. Yes?
In Rome, they had Roman law, which was uniform throughout their empire. Did the Byzantine Empire use Roman law, or did they have their own laws?
Yes, great question. Did the Byzantines use Roman law? 5th century, or 6th century emperor, rather, Justinian is the one who codified Roman law. It was a mess, all different redundant things. It wasn't written down in one place. So Justinian codified Roman law, put it in one easy manual to understand. And successive, as the years went on, and that sort of got out of date, successive Byzantine emperors would recodify it, add new things to it. So they used Roman law. But there are some interesting ways they adapted it. Divorce, for example. It was very hard to get a divorce. You could get 1, maybe 2, forget about a third. There's one case where a man and woman hated each other, and they were married. It was an arranged marriage, and they wanted to get divorced. So the Emperor Leo decided a good solution would be to lock them inside a house. And when after a week of this, nothing had advanced, he allowed a divorce on the grounds of mutual hatred. But generally, the way Roman law gets adapted is through a Christian.
What's the source of the concept of Byzantine bureaucracy? Is it these complex laws and?
Yeah, what's the definition or the origin? The negative term. It comes from the Crusades, because the Crusaders tend to be let's show me what to smash and hit, and we're going to win this, we're going to crush through. With the Byzantines, we're in a much weaker position, so we have to depend on diplomacy, a little more subtlety. They also had a court ceremonial that was, by this time, well over 1,000 years old. And if you wanted to go see the emperor, you could just walk in. You had to bow to this guy, pay off this guy, go see this one. When you finally got to the emperor, you could look at them, you had to bow down, you had all this strict protocol. And the Crusaders had this impression, this is all just a waste of time. And so they would use the term Byzantine as sort of a negative thing. Yeah, it's just unnecessarily complex. As well as the sinister, because there was this, the Crusaders always believed that the Byzantines were going to stab them in the back. And that also retains, you know, the word Byzantine still retains that. Yes?
On the day Constantinople fell, that was early in the morning, the Turks entered the city. I read that the Byzantine emperor took off his emperor clothes and went to the streets like a soldier fighting the Turks, and his body was never found. Is that true?
Yeah, that's right. The Ottomans desperately wanted to find him. But he did, when he saw that the city was lost, the Ottomans were pouring through, he threw off his imperial regalia, disappeared. The Byzantines, the Ottomans rather, after the battle was over, they needed to find him so that they could prove that he was dead so resistance wouldn't continue. So they went through, they washed the dead bodies, and they found one with boots on that had eagles on them. So they figured, all right, this is the body. And they cut off the head and displayed it to everyone. It failed to impress anyone who had known Constantine XI. So the Ottomans eventually admitted that, okay, we didn't really go. So his body never was found, but a number of legends did spring up afterwards. One in particular is that he's gone, his body's never found because he didn't die. An angel came down, turned him into marble, and he's buried below the Golden Gate, and one day, when the Greeks again control the city, he's going to come back and lead them to the restitution of the Byzantine Empire. Sort of like a King Arthur, you know, the once and future king. The interesting thing is, apparently, the Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror believed it, because he had the Golden Gate bricked up. The emperor couldn't enter the city.
It's still
Still
closed.
there? Right. There's a small Yes.
Were the inhabitants in Constantinople predominantly ethnically Greek? And how long did Latin continue to be used as an official language?
That's a good question. Latin as a official language was used up through the 7th century. The Emperor Lars finally said, all right, enough is enough. Because you had to publish everything twice, and it wasn't cheap to do that. And he was tired, if he wanted military efficiency, he was tired. And so in the 7th century, Greek becomes the official language. But the Byzantine Empire was always ethnically diverse. When the Crusaders do show up, 1000 AD, they complain that in the streets there's the babble of a dozen languages. People sort of look different. Greek was always the dominant language, but never the only